There's now an offer on the table from President Obama to Republicans to avoid what we're calling here on the show the fiscal curb. Despite being the only plan on the table, the proposal was instantly derided by Republicans as not serious.
That offer yesterday was simply not serious.
I mean, it was not a serious proposal. And so right now we're almost nowhere.
The White House plan would proceed in two stages. The first would include $1.6 trillion in additional tax revenue through an immediate increase in the top two marginal tax rates, in addition to capital gains and dividends increases, and around $600 billion in deduction limits for the wealthy. It also includes $50 billion in new stimulus funds, an extension of unemployment insurance, a mortgage refinancing program, and interestingly, a proposal not only to raise the debt ceiling but end Congress's ability to stop increases in the debt limit unless they have a two-thirds majority to bypass a veto. In the second phase would come $350 billion in reforms to what the White House calls entitlement programs, and we here on the show call social insurance. Not surprisingly, this is the least specific part of the proposal, making clear to Republicans that if they want cuts to social insurance, they are going to have to propose them. Yesterday, Speaker John Boehner once again refused to outline any specific cuts when asked about what cuts Republicans want in social insurance.
Look at our budget from the last 2 years, and there are plenty of specific proposals, most of which were part of the conversation that the president and I had 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago. There have been discussions about many of those same issues this time. So there's a lot from the conversations that we've had to inform almost anybody the kind of proposals that we're looking for.
Joining us now are Sam Seder, host of the podcast Majority Report on Majority.fm, and Don Peebles, a member of President Obama's National Finance Committee and the chairman and CEO of the Peebles Corporation. Great to have you here.
Great to be here.
So there's this proposal on the table, which I think is pretty good. And I just want to talk about the political dynamics here because they're kind of hilarious to me. Sam, what is your reaction to the reaction of Republicans to this proposal?
It's pretty funny. I mean, because I think like they are really in a tough position now because the president is playing a different game than he's been playing in the past. And he's basically saying to the Republicans, if you want to cut Medicare, if you want to propose any cuts to social insurance programs, let's hear it.
Right.
And the Republicans don't want to do that. They have had success in the past on running against Democrats when Democrats make the cuts that Republicans want them to make. And they were successful on that in 2010. They tried to do it in 2012 with less success. And now it's not on the table. And, you know, I don't have a sense of necessarily what's going on in the White House, but it seems to be more of an agenda that is more aligned with congressional Democrats. They're the ones who are going to have to run in 2 years, and they don't want to run on having cut Medicare. And they're basically saying to the Republicans, if this is what you want, bring it.
I think the politics of this are fascinating because it was so. We just had a whole election in which one of the main themes of the election was each party's candidate saying that the other party's candidate was the guy who really wanted to take the hatchet to Medicare or had already taken the hatchet to Medicare. This was intensely litigated. And then we have the election, and then we all come together for our fiscal curb negotiations, and everyone's saying, so do you want to be the one to tell them that we're going to take the hatchet to Medicare, even though the fact is people do not want Medicare to be cut?
Well, no, I think what you see is the president advancing his agenda, what he articulated in the campaign, which is fighting for middle-class tax cuts. And he's now saying, instead of being the balanced president, I think, that we saw in the first term, he's now saying, okay, here's our agenda. Now, Republicans, your agenda is spending cuts. Okay, propose them. Let's see what they are. And that's, you know, I think the right approach for the president in the short term politically. But ultimately, what happens is the Republicans are going to be reluctant to propose cuts. So that brings us more likely or closer to this fiscal cliff, which I think is more of a molehill than a mountain. But I think that's where we may end up, and I think we may see some more drama as a result of that.
Reluctant to raise taxes, but I'm cautiously optimistic that I'm seeing some people pull away from Grover Norquist and actually hold on to the mantle of Reagan, and that Reagan raised taxes, and then Corker from Tennessee saying, well, I'm not beholden to Grover Norquist or to the pledge, I'm beholden to my constituency. So I actually see a little bit of movement here in terms of raising revenue. Now, the cutting of programs, that's going to be a different story.
Well, I don't think anybody wants to cut programs, obviously, and the Republicans don't, because they're now in what they consider the rebuilding mode. But, you know, the challenge is going to be that there are Democrats. If you take a look at some of these tax issues, for example, estate taxes, the president is not going to have unified support from the House on that issue because he's going to lose, most likely, the Congressional Black Caucus. He's going to lose representatives of farming states because it's going to decimate
It is not going to decimate.
Well, actually,
that is an absolute ridiculous overstatement.
Let's think about it this way. Let's look at it from African Americans' perspective. Hundreds of years of oppression. Finally, there's an opportunity to go and compete in a balanced way in this economy today. But there's a head start. And so of generational transferring of wealth. And so finally now, with equality that's taken place since the Civil Rights Movement, you have a more alignment of wealth. And now it's going to be wiped out by 55%.
Such an infinitesimally small number of people. I mean, literally, we could fit all of the people you're talking about probably in this room.
You're talking about African Americans in the United States who are subject to the estate tax?
I'm not arguing the actual merits of the issue. I'm telling you the politics of it. The Congressional Black Caucus voted with George Bush the last time around on the state taxes,
we're going to talk
and they
about
are
the politics of it.
By the way, and they are again.
If we're going to talk about the politics of it, let's be explicit. We're talking about multi-millionaires. We're not talking about African American populations.
We're talking about job generators, small business owners.
Multi-millionaires, people who have over $10 million, $5 million as an individual to pass on to their children, and don't want to be taxed on every dollar above that amount. We're not talking about African Americans. We're not talking about any other subgroups. We're talking about multi-millionaires who represent point. Yes, but the politics are who's giving money to those politicians.
No.
Because we're talking about 0.02% of the population.
The Congressional Black Caucus voted with George Bush, and that's why you saw a dramatic cut in estate taxes and no increase in estate taxes. I'm telling you that the political dynamics, which is what we're talking about. But if you want to argue the point, we can argue the point on the filibuster rule and what the merits of that are. We can argue.
Yes, but that's the point.
But it's political reality. Political reality of what's going to happen later on this month or next month. What's going to happen? What's really
the argument you're making is that the president cannot get the votes he needs for the revenue he's proposing? Is that the point?
No, I think that he's going to have some drama, and there's going to be some disagreement within the Democratic caucus, and one of them is going to be estate taxes because that is one of the major points of the tax increase.
The other places, very wealthy people are behind the push to repeal tax. That's the politics of it. It may be the case that he has to give that up because the power of money trumps these other things, but that's the politics.
The last time around, the swing was the Congressional Black Caucus.
Right.
And that's what took the Democrats
Hold that thought.
because of the Democrat issue.
The other place that I think that they're going to have internal caucus dissent is if this proceeds in a way. Right now, there's $350 billion in cuts to Medicare that are on the table. That's the sort of initial offer bid. And I want to talk about the politics of that very, very politically dangerous topic right after this.